Hey everyone, I'm Julie Gunlock. I'm host of the Bespoke Parenting Hour. For those new to the program, this podcast is focused on how parents should custom tailor their parenting style to fit what's best for their families, themselves, and most importantly, their kids. I'm excited to have Vanessa Elias, founder of Thrive with a Guide. She's a mental health activist, certified parenting coach, speaker, and writer, specializing in whole family synergy and well-being. I love that. Elias has the coolest job. She works with parents to find ways to improve the life of their children, their lives, and the lives of their families as a whole. That sounds pretty perfect for this podcast. She helps parents shift their lens, translate their children's behaviors, and take actionable steps to change life in their homes. Vanessa and her husband have 3 daughters currently in college, high school, and middle school. That's a nice stretch. She was born in Germany. This is really interesting. She was born in Germany, grew up in the US, and raised her children in Utah, London, and Zurich. This is very exciting. Before moving to Connecticut in 2013, having experienced very different parenting environments, Vanessa is acutely aware of how a region's parenting culture affects children's emotional well-being. Vanessa, I am so excited to talk to you. Thanks for coming on, and welcome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me here. And I love that you think I have a cool job, because I think so. I feel really fortunate to do what I do. So thank you.
I always ask my guests, if you were to describe your parenting style, just give me a quick answer on how do you, I mean, there's so many styles, right? There's free range, there's hovering, there's helicopter. How do you define your parenting style?
I would say adaptive. That would be the easiest way to describe it. Our kids all have different needs, different situations have different needs. And also through my experience of living in different cultures, your culture has different impact on you. So it's just flexible and adaptable.
I really love that. I love that. That's actually, like I said, when I was introducing you, that is a perfect fit for this podcast and what I really urge parents to do. And I feel very uncomfortable with our culture that tells us there is a right way to parent and a wrong way to parent. So I love this word adaptive. I don't think I feel that I too am an adaptive parent, and I've never been able to find the word. So I appreciate that, because I will steal that. I will now call myself an adaptive parent. I want to talk about what you do. You help parents transform their lives. Really do that. Look at each child, look at the needs of each child, their own needs, their family's needs. Tell us exactly what that involves.
Oh, it's personalized parent education is what I call it. And there are some things that are the same in all families because we're humans, and our biggest need is to feel seen and loved for who we are, so that we feel lovable as we are. And parents have that tremendous impact or potential opportunity with their children to see them and hear them and love them as they are. And we all want that. That's something we all want. And so I love my work. My kids, the parents that I work with, their kids are anywhere between the ages of 3 and 44.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I've worked with some parents who are also grandparents. But it's all about relationships, connection, and communication. That's what it boils down to. And every situation is different. Every house is different. The dynamics of a family, though, are all connected. I always liken it to a mobile hanging above a crib. Like, you move one of those pieces and the whole thing moves. So we are all connected. There is just no way to avoid that. So a lot of times parents feel powerless, but if they know that they make changes and they respond differently, that makes changes in the mobile.
So what type of parent do you find seeks out your help the most? Is there a type, maybe, do you find that parents seek out your help because they have trouble letting go? For instance, they have trouble adapting to their children getting older. What is maybe there isn't, but what is that thing?
I think it's just anyone that's struggling. Or I like to say, if I'm a parent, I can help you, because everybody is in a different situation. So it's someone that's actually what I think the people that reach out to me are the ones that are really ready to be vulnerable and make change. Because there are a lot of people who are struggling, but they don't take that extra step to make change. And so people that I work with know that what they're doing isn't working. Basically, I guess that would be the short way to put it.
I think sometimes feel like these questions are a little overgeneralized, but I do want to know, like, what would you say you have this incredible experience of working with probably all sorts of different people, different parenting styles, different kids. But if there was one thing that you think parents are doing wrong, right? And
Mhm.
I suspect you kind of avoid that word. Um,
I do.
but I feel like, and again, maybe that's a bad question because the whole point of this is that we should be appreciating different styles of parenting. But if there's one thing that you think you wish parents would sort of, I mean, is it like relax? Is it sort of um,
Mm.
trust your instincts? I think just in this culture, what are you seeing as more of the consistent, maybe a consistent problem?
Absolutely. I think that one of the consistent things I see are parents not having their own lives and parents not taking care of themselves
Hmm.
first. We live in a really martyred culture where moms especially give everything to their children, to their jobs, volunteer work, and they're depleted. And we've all heard the oxygen mask on you first, but we don't practice it, because if you're not okay, your kids aren't going to be okay. And if you aren't, well, like, is there life and joy in your life outside of your children? I think the pendulum has swung so far. I think a lot of kids, like, I think of it in sports as an example. A lot of kids participated in sports and their parents didn't come to games. And they felt hurt and neglected. Well, the pendulum has swung and we go to every game, rain or thunder or what, it's sacrificing everything else, right? Sacrificing our own lives, our own social engagements. And so I think that's a really, that's an all pervasive thing, is that feeling, and that also puts extra pressure on the kids, right? If your child is your whole life, that's extra pressure on the children to perform and to be okay. So I think that would be have your own life would
Yeah.
be short.
I just want to warn you that my someone came to my door and rang the doorbell, and my dog is like going a little nuts.
Okay.
So if you hear that, everything's fine. Everything's fine. This is really interesting. It's funny that I'm sitting here asking you, like, think like, what is the best way to parent? And it's very interesting to me that your answer was parents need to do a better job of taking care of themselves. That is something we don't hear a lot of, and you're absolutely right. There has been we fetishize motherhood now and parenting in general, and we've made it, that if you don't do everything for your child or attend every event or this or that, it's the end of the world. And so there is that. But I also think that there's an interesting I'd like to get your thoughts on the role of fear in
Mm.
parenting. And I think that is one of the most powerful elements that parents have to deal with is not only fear that your child will be hurt, but fear is very, very lucrative. We see this in food marketing. We see this in,
Mm.
sort of the safety world out there. Tell us about the role of fear, and if that's something you sometimes deal with when you're consulting with these parents.
Oh, all the time. All the time. Fear is present for a number of different reasons. Not only it's like, as Lenore Skenazy always talks about the faces on the milk carton, in terms of physical safety, but fear for the future,
Yeah.
fear for what may be, and also fear of judgment, that somehow it's going to come back to you, that you are the one because your kid
Yes.
didn't do X, Y, or Z. It's fear of judgment. And that's a general problem that we have, right? The whole like being canceled and
Yeah.
fear of judgment is huge.
It's the old keeping up with the Joneses too. Like, oh, she's got Timmy in soccer, baseball, and he plays the cello and he does.
Yep.
It's like that fear that like I'm not doing enough for my kids, so they're not gonna like have a productive life.
Exactly. And then exactly. There's just, and so stepping back from our culture, that's where I feel like I'm so lucky to have lived in different cultures of different ways of raising children and being and living in the world, is that you can see that this is not the way this is everywhere. And you can see the impact on our kids. And also
So
it's just not good for us to be fearful all the time. I always say, like, don't live it twice. I just had a session yesterday where I was saying that they were worried about like their 20-something-year-old, like never be able to have a job and won't succeed in life. And it's like, whoa. Let's just stay in the moment here. That may never even come true. Never mind the fact that you're living it twice.
So let's talk. You mentioned, this culture isn't the same in other countries and that your experience. Let's talk a little bit about your background. You personally were raised, is that right? Did I read that off? I think you're
born
raised
in the U.S.
Yes.
Born in Germany.
Right.
Moved to the U.S. when I was 2. My mom's German, my dad's American.
Okay. Well, it's funny. I have the president of IWF actually lives in Germany on and off. And she has this, it's interesting, in Germany, there's much more of an embrace of the free range movement. Right. And then she comes back to the US and suddenly her kids don't have that freedom. And I hear a lot from her about that, which is really fascinating. But tell us your experience and how that's sort of how living abroad and living in more free range friendly areas have shaped your philosophy of parenting.
Absolutely. I think I've lived in London 3 times, and 2 of them with the kids. And I think it's very similar to the US in a lot of its ways. But the difference that I saw was regarding mothering and being a mother. And they looked at me in horror that I was going to manage 3 kids all on my own without anyone helping to do anything, help like take a kid to an activity, right? This whole idea of running myself ragged, which I think so many moms do, like we run ourselves to the ground, like, doing everything and going out and having coffees and getting together with friends was like a whole new world to me, that was the norm.
Yeah.
So that was really good for me as a mom. And then Switzerland was, a whole different reality. I remember when I first moved there being in shock when I saw a kid with a broken arm, because I thought my first thought was, oh, I didn't know they had those anymore.
Right.
Like, you just don't see it. And then there'd be like a broken leg and a kid with a concussion falling out of a tree. And like, it was just like part of life. It's just there was no crisis. It was just,
it's so funny. And I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's funny. One of my favorite stories was the president of IWF, Carrie. She was living over in Germany, and they have these beer gardens that have playgrounds.
Yep.
And can you imagine in the US? So they have these like insane tall structures, right? And her son fell off, and I think he broke his arm, if I'm remembering right. And it was so fascinating because she said they brought him over, or when they went to pick him up, like his arm had been wrapped, and they're like, yeah, sorry, he might have broken his arm. And like the expectation was like her going, okay, thanks, and then like walking away.
Exactly.
And then like it was broken and there was no follow-up. Can you imagine the lawsuits? Totally. Can you imagine the hysteria? Right?
Liability is a huge factor in our culture, and it's really shaped us in so many ways that we don't realize. When I tell the story of when we moved back we experienced a big culture shock coming back to the US after 6 years abroad. And it was just, I had told my daughter I don't remember, I still use the be careful, be mindful, I should say, when you're on the monkey bar. She was in preschool.
Yeah.
It might be slippery with your mittens on. And the teacher said, oh, no, we don't wear mittens on monkey bars. And, oh, no, we're not allowed to go on that if it's cold outside. You can't go at that. I'm like, what the heck? Like, how is she going to have any fun?
Right. It's funny too. It's funny too, like the nurses who call you and for everything, like that's another thing that I've heard, Carrie's like literally like it had to be like spurting blood for the German schools to call you, where here in the United States, they're like, he skinned his knee. And you're like, I don't care. I'm in a meeting. Right. So.
Yep. And that goes back to, that's how the liability culture has shaped us. There's just, that's a real challenge.
And there's also, I think in the food world too, this idea, I remember having a conversation with a friend, and she was very worked up that her daughter would not eat vegetables and very concerned. Right. And she said that, she, and she'd read, you have to present a food 20 times before a child. And I remember just thinking like, okay, I'm way too poor for that, because the guidance is like, don't ever push them. Just keep presenting it and if they don't touch it, it's fine. I'm like, okay, first of all, my mother would kill me if I had ever left something. And so of course, I was joking, but I was like, did you try yelling at her? Right. And my friend was like, oh, you're not supposed to yell. Right. And so it's interesting too, I think, because my instincts, when that happened with my kids, I was like, you're not getting up from the table until you have like at least one bite. Right. Or you're not going to, you're not going to play with your Legos tonight if you don't. Like I kind of parent like my mom parented. And so it's interesting to me that she didn't even, because she admitted that that like, oh yeah, I guess I should, or like I guess I should be a little bit more firm with her or something. And it was interesting because she's like, and my mother would have been, and she totally denied her instincts and instead like read a million things on how to get a kid to eat a carrot, right? Tell me a little bit about, along with fear, along with litigation, along with our culture, how parents are increasingly denying their own instincts and us and like rejecting maybe what their own parents did.
Yeah, that's a challenging one. And there's always a fine line between, is it instincts or is it habits? Is it what you've seen and know, so it seems familiar, right? And or you don't know another way, how to go about doing this. I know that every family is different and we all have rules. Like I know what works for my family. I know our rule was that you had to have something and you had to try it, you had to chew it. And but you didn't have to swallow it. Like you could spit it out if you didn't like it.
Yeah.
But I'm really sensitive. Also, there has been a huge uptick in eating disorders in both boys and girls.
Yes.
And so I'm really sensitive to issues of control with food, and using it as a punishment and valuing one food as good food and bad food.
Yes.
Like a whole other, all foods fit. And so, sometimes foods and always foods. So the food is especially a challenge. And that's a whole other area of judgment as well.
I know you'll have to come back. It's a whole nother, I always say it's a whole other Oprah show. Like,
So I think I think it's approaching it with curiosity. Why do I feel this way? Why do I feel that's not okay? Why do I, and you don't need to spend a lot of time on it. It's not like a whole, dissertation that you need to work on trying a carrot, but also role modeling is key. Like we don't really, like if you're eating carrots and you're eating vegetables and it's part of your family meal, that's what's powerful.
Yeah.
Right. That's what you're showing. And also it's like tiny little things, a big deal. So they don't care. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
You got bigger fish to fry.
I remember when my son was still had his passy at, I think he was 2.5, and someone was very worried. And I was like, he's not going to go to prom with his passy. Really? Like, and I actually was very laid back about a lot of that stuff because I just didn't think it was true. And I think I just always thought kids will grow out of it. And I am a firm believer in doing what's easiest in many ways. And if your child, one of my, my other children weren't reliant on their passies as much as my middle child. And I just I was very zen about things. Not that I wasn't worried about a million other things, but on some things, I just didn't make it a big deal. And I sort of wish, that's my goal with this podcast. And when I talk about parenting is, I hate the phrase like give grace, but there is so little grace given to parents these days. I feel like there is definitely this sense of right and wrong. And I know we can talk more on that, but I want to pivot a little bit and ask you, you help parents figure out the best way to deal with individual children. And also that word synergy was in your bio, right? Was it synergy? I think was such a great word because you have different kids, but ultimately you all live in the same house. And so figuring that out, but I'd like to touch on that, but also if we can, what has your business been like post-COVID? Have you, I'm sure you've noticed an uptick, but I'd love your thoughts on, we don't have to get into like, school closures, masking. We don't talk about that. And learning loss. These are all things that we are all concerned about. But how did your business change and how did your perspective change post-COVID?
Well, honestly, I felt like people were finally talking about what I had already been seeing and dealing with for years. So, I mean, COVID really put the kids' mental health and family struggles and some of these issues that we were having on the forefront. COVID put gasoline on a crisis. I mean, that's really, it just inflamed it. So it was already, a lot of us were already feeling really concerned about the number of kids who were struggling, and the younger age of the kids who were struggling. And so COVID really added to that. And I think one of the things, we always talk about this lost learning. The entire world had this. Okay. It's not like just, one state or one, the entire world did. We all suffered this. And what what we rarely talk about is the lost social and emotional learning they had, the lost learning how to navigate friendships, and, not like to be able to be in real life where you don't have to script what you're saying in a text or in a, Snapchat, they don't really write, but all these things of being able to have face-to-face interactions, right? Those are a lot of things that these kids have lost, and they're struggling because of it, in all sorts of ways.
Yes. And it's interesting how I take my kids to school. I drive my kids to school because their school is a little bit further away, but we pass a bus stop every morning filled with kids who don't speak to each other. It's probably 15 kids, and their hair is all on their faces, and they're all looking at their phones. I would love to get your thoughts on technology. I am very strict with my kids. Funny because I always identify myself as a free range mom. I'm a devotee of Lenore Skenazy. I know you had mentioned her, and you're friends with Lenore as well. And we both appreciate what she does, but I am super authoritarian when it comes to tech, and I'd love your thoughts.
That's bingo. Okay. First of all, that is like their blankie, right? Anytime anyone's uncomfortable, they go right to it, right? It gives them comfort. It's a distraction. Number one. And the other thing, when you ask me like a thing about all parents in general, what would be the one thing besides not taking them care of themselves? They're controlling the wrong things. That is the biggest thing. They're controlling the grades. They're looking at, they're controlling the carrots on the plate. They're controlling this and controlling that, but they need to control bedtime.
Yes.
They need to control technology. They need to get right. That's basically how I feel, is that we're not controlling, I have a middle schooler. We had the wait until 8th plan, going, and then COVID hit. And so she had a phone earlier, and she's my third, and we had a phone earlier. So I allow her now to have, she's 13, almost 14. She has Snapchat, she has TikTok, but she has a 20-minute limit daily on each of those things.
Nice.
So I put those, so she's still connected, right? She still knows what's going on, but it's not sucking the life out of her, right? It's not even just what happens on there. It's what she's not doing if she's on there, right? We're so focused on, definitely I have a whole thought on what they're doing on there and what happens on there, but it's also the rest of their life that, the rest of the day they're missing out. Anyway, and that happens for older kids too. My daughter, I have to say, my senior in high school, they did something in statistics class. They looked at their sleep and their screen time. One kid had 13 hours of screen time and 3 hours of sleep. So right there, those are the two things, as well as the opportunities for free play. That's a big one. That's how to work upstream, right? Let these kids have free play.
I'd like you to close on a little bit of talk about free play. Why is it important?
Free play is so important for this. It's back to this control in many ways. It's this internal locus of control that our kids don't have. And when you don't have that, when you feel powerless, of course you're depressed, right? The world is happening to you and around you. So they get shuttled to soccer practice, or the coach tells you something, and they get, from one thing to another. I'm not just picking on sports. It happens in other things, but also happens in other things. But it's so important for them to learn how to get their needs met with another person without losing a playmate, without having the pressure that, sports used to be, here I go back to sports, used to be a relief of pressure. Now it's an act of pressure. So having free play, and that also helps us work upstream, to sort of paraphrase Desmond Tutu, is, we keep trying to save these kids from the river, pulling them out. What's happening upstream? So play is something that's missing. So the more play we can put in, make opportunities for that, make it a priority, the better off our kids are going to be from falling in stream, and not falling in stream, I should say.
Well, listen, I could go on and on and on, and I'd really like for you to come back and talk to me. I think I'd love to talk to you further about tech. I'd love to talk to you further about free play. I think each of those topics deserve their own separate podcast. This was a great introduction to you, though,
Thank you.
and your work. Tell the listeners where they can find you and hire you. Gosh, I want you to come over right now. But tell us where you're sort of out there writing and
my business name is Thrive with a Guide. So I'm on the various social medias, except not yet TikTok.
Are you on Twitter?
I'm on Twitter. Yeah. So
what's your handle? Do you know?
Thrive with a Guide.
Oh, great.
Minus it doesn't all fit. So W_. Yeah, that doesn't fit.
Okay.
But follow me on each of those social media platforms and connect. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm very passionate about this. So
well, I can tell it is a subject that I care about as well. And honestly, your Thrive with a Guide, the guidance that you are giving parents is exactly the mission of this podcast, to really encourage parents to craft a parenting style that works for them. So I really look forward to talking to you further. This was great. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much.